The National Union of Public Workers is not happy at all tonight with the announced layoff of an estimated 300 workers from the drainage unit. The union convened an emergency meeting for the workers this morning. Ryan Broom now reports.
Tempers flared and emotions were high this morning as the National Union of Public Workers convened an emergency meeting for scores of laid-off workers from government's drainage unit. Several of them, from supervisors to general workers, did not hide their anger and frustration about the situation ahead of the meeting, and they spoke to CBC.
We work in the rain, we work in the hot sun, we do all we had to do for the drainage division. I don't think that we get a fair deal at all.
Got a 10-year and stuff. How can get my house run? How can get things when I got loans to pay? How can get anything to do?
Well, everybody disappointed. I don't know what I can do. I got my loans to pay and bills. I got to pay like bill, water bill, and I got my chairs and all the things to do. They never tell us nothing. And we ain't got no more job, no work.
The anger and frustration was not just limited to the workers. Speaking to the media at the end of the meeting, NUPW General Secretary Dennis Clark was also very emotional. He called for the head of the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of the Environment.
If they have to, I hope it would be a different approach where you sit down and you look at these things in a proper way. That's why I am saying the Permanent Secretary Ministry should be sent home.
Mr. Clark says the union's back is now against the wall, and he is extremely upset about the way the workers have been terminated, some of whom are still on vacation. He says the union plans to meet with officials from both the Ministry of the Environment and the Ministry of the Civil Service to thrash out outstanding issues, including the non-issuance of NIS severance forms. So all that remains is to find out what will come out of those talks between the Ministry of the Environment and the NUPW. Ryan Broom, CBC News.
Well, teachers are expected to meet tomorrow to discuss the pending layoffs across the public sector. As you know, last month, Finance Minister Chris Sinclair announced that 3,000 civil servants would be sent home as part of government's measures to shore up the ailing economy. Now, President of the Barbados Union of Teachers, Pedro Shepherd, in a telephone interview, said the union wants to meet with educators to discuss these and other developments.
It is primarily to discuss the whole layoff in the public sector. I'm sure even though they were sort of reassured by the Minister of Finance that they would not be touched in this round, there's no guarantee that they would not be affected in the second or third round. And so we thought it necessary to meet with teachers tomorrow to allay any fears, hear concerns, hear of any other suggestions that they may want to offer government to ease the whole layoff situation, etc. I guess we'll also discuss the whole issue of appointments, because recently we've had the ad for teachers for the public service of Barbados as well.
And there has been further worker unrest. Employees of the Barbados Workers Union Cooperative Credit Union were off the job today. They spilled onto Fairchild Street in protest of two workers who were laid off today. The workers claim that the sending home of the two employees was not carried out consistent with normal procedures and that management did not follow the collective agreement process, which allows for consultation on the matter. The workers are being represented by the Barbados Workers Union. The BWU Cooperative Credit Union is a separate entity to the Barbados Workers Union and as such is not managed by the Barbados Workers Union. Well, the Anglican Church is prepared to offer assistance to those who have been laid off. This from the Most Reverend Anglican Bishop of Barbados and Archbishop of the West Indies, Dr. John Holder.
I have asked, for example, the parishes in this diocese, each parish, to keep abreast of what is going on, to be aware of the persons in their congregations or in the district where the church is situated, or the persons who may have lost their jobs, and try to reach out to those persons and try to see what we can do as a church to help them through this rough time. So we are going to be very, very, very aware and active in terms of offering assistance to those persons who are going through this rough time. Sometimes the assistance may simply be counseling and encourage them to hold on to the faith that God is still with them. Sometimes the response could be give them something that they need at that point in time in their lives. But the church has a role to play. And the primary role of the church, I should say, is to emphasize that God is still with us in spite of the rough times.
Dr. Holder says that despite job losses, God is still with the people, and he asks that Barbadians remain firm in their faith.
And once you believe that God is there, always there, will be there all the time, crisis or no crisis, then it's up to us as human beings, as his children, we can say, to respond to his other children who are in need. So my word to Barbados at this time is that we stand firm, we hold on to our faith, we can believe that God is with us, whatever we may be called to experience during the coming year.
Well, joining us now to discuss the pending layoffs is CBC's political analyst Maureen Holder. Maureen, good evening to you.
Good evening, Peter.
What's your reading of the handling of the layoffs in government service to date?
Well, the government had outlined a set of proposals which it intends to embark on to reduce the size of the public service, and by extension to reduce its expenditure with respect to wages and salaries. And therefore, one would have to take in consideration that the government would have considered the implications of doing such, and more or less came to a point where they had to implement such a procedure or a method of dealing with the public expenditure and by extension dealing with the size of the civil service. So by and large, it is a sagacious move on my part. You know, in my view, I think that the government is moving in the right direction and would therefore need to implement rather than continue with the discussions and so on.
There are some who are of the view that there has not been sufficient consultation, particularly with the workers' representatives. What's your reading of that thus far? Well,
I don't know. The government has to speak for itself in this regard. One really has to question whether the union's efforts will crystallize into any tangible results at this moment. Having said that, I would want to question the strength of the union at this point in time. Comparing it to what took place in 1991, if they have the level of support that they did back in 1991, if the rationalization for any industrial action is the same. So therefore, you have to compare what took place in 1991 with what is currently going on. And in my view, the proposals offered to the government does not reduce the fiscal imbalance or the fiscal situation, harsh fiscal situation, which the government has to deal with.
So what do you think the unions should do as the workers' representatives?
I believe the union has to determine amongst itself what is the best approach to take. Obviously, the union has to speak to its constituents. It has to represent those who support its membership and so on. You would expect a certain level of dialogue. Indeed, the activities that we saw the union engage in the last couple of weeks is testimony to that level of engagement and what they can do. But again, it goes back to the whole question I raised. What tangible results can come about from the union's position? I would believe, I don't think that they will get widespread support from the private sector. I would believe that they would have to come to a decision as to whether they are going to support the proposals of the government, which is in the best interest or the greater interest of the country.
You raised the private sector. That brings to my mind this social partnership, and there are some who are of the opinion that this fabric of the social partnership has been weakened because of this situation here. True, false, what's your reading?
Well, the union has been criticized to some extent with breaching, so to speak, or compromising their traditional role. And their persons are suggesting that being part of that social partnership really kind of like ties the hand of the union. Now, I believe that union being a part of the social partnership lends to a certain degree of stability in the country. And indeed, the union has to come to a point at this point in time where it recognizes what is practical, the best solutions for this country. Obviously, again, as I said, they have to represent their workers' interests, but they have to do it in a sagacious way, in a way that says, well, look, we are looking after the interests of the country, and offer proposals like perhaps a fixed-term contract, offer proposals to the Ministry of the Civil Service to compile a list of names with profiles of persons who can be retrained, at what level they can be retrained, whether it's academic training or technical or vocational training they will require. These are more practical things or solutions that the union can offer at this time. You know, I mean, it's one thing to represent the interests of your constituency or constituents, but it's another thing to bring practical solutions to resolve a situation.
Let's look at the political capital of the government now as a consequence of this. What do you think now is their political capital?
Well, The political capital will be determined on how soon government resumes Parliament after the Christmas recession and get in there to deal with this issue within the House of Parliament. Speak to the issues. The government has to speak to these issues, speak in terms of endearing the population on the extent of the measures that they are embarking upon. There's no point in being reticent at this time. They have to come out, they have to speak to the nation, and they have to be in that sort of frame of mind where that they are seen as addressing the questions that the nation would have at this point in time.
Who, to your mind, should speak to this? Because
well, the Prime Minister has to start the ball rolling for sure, but we'll have to wait. The Prime Minister is very unassuming in my view, and you would have to wait to see what type of response he will offer. But it has to be a response that appeals to the hearts and minds of Barbadians, that this is in the best interest of Barbados, and that government has done all it possibly could up to this point to alleviate any possible retrenchment of workers in the public service.
There's some of the view who think that this really weakens Barbados' standing not just regionally but globally, politically as well.
Well, there are other. America had a significant cuts in its public service when this recession first started. We're no America. I hesitate to compare us to America, but the point of the matter is countries have undergo situations like this. We have a oversized public service which needs to be dealt with, and this is an occasion for us to start restructuring. We've had commentators on the other side, Barbados Labour Party commentators, suggesting that we need to restructure the economy. So this is a good time to start, and the government needs to implement the proposals that they said that they would.
The Student Guild of the University of the West Indies at Cave Hill says it will be intensifying its lobbying of government with the hope of it moving away from its current position of now asking students to foot the bill for their education at the start of the semester this year. President Damani Paris says the issue is too serious a one to ignore and cannot be accepted without more open dialogue between both students and the ministry.
The Guild has not yet considered revising its position. It stated its position extremely clearly via the media outlets, and we think that it is extremely essential that we maintain that position for the protection and interests of our students. It was a fair position when we took it. It is still a fair position today, and we believe that if we continue to hold strong to the principles and to the just position that we have taken, that we can expect the best results from it.
Mr. Paris is hoping that some amicable resolution can be reached with this issue.
Well, we are currently speaking with the Prime Minister. We're in discussions with him. As was requested, our mediator is still Sir Roy Trotman on this matter, and we believe that his expertise in union matters and matters of sensitive nature will put us in a brilliant position to continue to negotiate on behalf of the student body for the most amicable and best solution possible.
To combat the rise in unemployment, Barbadians need to be more generous even with the little things. This piece of advice from the Most Reverend Jason Gordon, the Catholic Bishop of Bridgetown, as the year progresses.
I think those who have to be generous with those who do not have. And this is a time where I think as a society we can really rethink the way in which we see ourselves from this individualism where I have and whoever doesn't have, that's their problem, to I have and that means I'm blessed and that means I need to be generous with those who do not have. In a time of scarcity like what we're facing in 2014, it must become a time of incredible generosity.
Bishop Gordon says for 2014, the community needs to improve its interpersonal relationships, and he's hopeful that this will happen.
It is a time when we have to be really proactive in being available to people and helping people through the challenging times that they will be facing during this year. My outlook for 2014 is a very hopeful outlook, not optimism. Optimism is that things will get better. Hope is, even if things get worse, we are going to be okay.
Barbados stands to save some $2 million if road accidents are reduced. A high proportion of this expenditure, according to the Barbados Road Safety Association, is spent on treating people injured in accidents. In fact, Public Relations Officer Richard Cox says some accidents are so severe that the injured are hospitalized for an ongoing period of time.
The idea is to cut the serious accidents in half. I'm told that it cost the country $3.5 million, as I said earlier, to care for road accident victims per year. And if we can cut the accident rate in half, it goes to reason that we'll be cutting the finances in half. And we will save something in the like of, say, $2 million, which is a lot of money in these days when financial matters are so tight.
In St. Lucia, the National Emergency Management Organization and the island's Met Office have been fending off accusations that they've failed to issue the appropriate warnings ahead of the Christmas Eve trough system. That weather event took 6 lives and has caused hundreds of thousands of dollars in damage to the island's infrastructure. NEMO's director, Don French, says in addition to some challenges getting accurate information from the Met Office, NEMO's early warning system was down.
Unfortunately, things happen, and the flood early warning system in Corinth chose this time to be offline. And the technicians have actually contacted the Japanese government's JICA to give us guidance of how to correct why it has got offline. So yes, I was also thinking about that it was really an awful time when we really needed that system to be online. We actually had to shut it down. I don't know if it's a software problem, but we need to debug it.
The government of Jamaica is taking steps to trim its public sector wage bill. It's just one of the requirements under the loan agreement with the International Monetary Fund. Parliamentarians have debated and affirmed the Civil Service General Order of 2013. Public Service Minister Horace Daly spoke about some of the changes.
130 new posts were created, 154 posts were retitled, and 348 posts were reclassified, and 69 posts were upgraded. Part 2 of this book, which was tabled last week, section shows new salary scales in the following classification groups: education officers, who were reclassified, the health technician and associate professional categories, health support categories, and infirmary administration category.
The minister says the government must ensure efficiency in its departments and agencies. Meanwhile, opposition member of Parliament Delroy Chuck supported the order. However, he lamented the poor service often displayed at government agencies.
The people of Jamaica are not being well served, and we pay an enormous amount of money. They are not being well served, and I say it I say, Mr. Speaker, at virtually every government agency, the productivity, the performance can be improved. There are some of them which are not bad, Mr. Speaker, but at virtually every government agency, at any time of the day, you see a long line with people waiting to be served. Lost man hours, working hours, Mr. Speaker, are being lost because people have to be waiting.
In Port of Spain, veteran journalist and editor-in-chief of the Newsday newspaper, Therese Mills, is dead. Ms. Mills, who was 85, died yesterday following a brief illness. Her contribution to national education, entertainment and opinion shaping in Trinidad and Tobago was recognized by the state in 1987 with the Hummingbird Medal. In 2012, she received the nation's second highest medal, the Chiconia Medal, also in recognition for her outstanding contribution. According to the Media Association of Trinidad and Tobago, since taking up the challenge at Newsday, Ms. Mills was able to guide the paper to its pinnacle, being the most read paper for 8 consecutive surveys.